So I have to take two topics for this particular subject. One is suspension, other one is therapeutic peripheral joint mobilization. So suspension is little smaller one, but it needs equipments for demonstration. So whenever you are coming back to campus, I will take this particular practical again in person. So now for theoretical purpose, I'll explain you with videos. Is that clear? Another topic is peripheral joint mobilization. It is little bigger one. It is little bigger one. So you need to really concentrate to understand the peripheral joint mobilization topic. Okay, so for R12, when I took them the last moment, they were finding it difficult to understand at the last week of the class. So that's why for you, I thought I will take little early. So you can spend some time to read this particular topic. Okay, so suspension therapy. So everybody would have enjoyed swing at the younger age, isn't it? So that swing is nothing but our suspension therapy. So I hope you know what a swing. So most of you would have sat in a swing and you would have played with a swing. Most of you would have lie down in the using a swing. So all these things you would have used in your childhood days. Exactly. So with that same thing, we are going to use the particular concept, but we are going to use it for a therapeutic purpose. So the main concept behind the suspension is we need to lift up the body part from the floor or from the mat so that it is not so that the gravity is not affecting it. Is that clear? So we need to make use, that means we need to reduce the gravity, we need to eliminate the gravity so the body part becomes little lesser weight and it is able to swing or it is able to move in the air. Is that clear? So that is the concept of suspension. So whenever you stand, whenever you sit, if you see, you need to act. That means your muscles need to act against the gravity. So the gravity will be pulling the muscle down, but the muscle have to act against it. And then because of that only you need to have more muscle power if you want to walk or if you want to sit or if you want to do any activity. But here, when you are lifting the body part and when you are suspending the body part a little above in the air, or when it is not affected by the gravity, automatically the body part will become little lesser weight and it will be moving in the air. Okay, so that is the main concept of the suspension therapy. So every topic, like not only this topic, every topic will have a core concept. Then it will be having a like a definition or a concept. Then it will be having the effects and uses. Then it will be having the procedure. Then it will be having indication and contraindication. So you have to keep all this five in mind. So if you take any one technique, it will be having a fact or you can say definition. Then next is it will be having an indication. Indication means for which you are supposed to do that particular technique. Then you will be having something called contraindication. So contraindication means for which you are not supposed to do the particular technique. Then effects and uses. Effects and uses means if you do the technique, what is the use of the particular technique or how the patient will be benefited by the technique. So that is called effects and uses. Then you will have something called procedure. So procedure means how you will be performing the technique. So all the therapeutic skills topic or technique you can divide into all these aspects. You can make a tabular column and write it so that it is easy for you to correlating and it is easy for you to study at the end. So you can just make a tabular column and put all under this topic and you can make it as a bigger tabular column so that you can compare and study at the end of your semester. Is that clear? So the concept of this suspension is if you have the gravitational effect, If the body part needs more muscle power, so the body part will become little heavier. So you just eliminate the gravity and suspend the body part above the gravity, so that the body part will be moving in the air or swinging in the air. So that is the concept of suspension. So what are the materials that is needed for suspension? So first thing, if you see, this is called a suspension cage. Is that clear? So this is called as suspension cage. So you can, it will be having wheels so that you can move this and you can put it above a chair, you can put it above a cot, or you can put it above any other, whatever you have. Wherever you want to move, you can move, and you can put it above the mat, or you can put it above a cot, or put it above a chair, like that you can move it. Okay, so this is called suspension cage. So you need some materials to do the suspension. First is you need to have a fixed point. So for that fixed point, you need to have something called hook. Okay, so you need to have a fixed point where you will be suspending the body part. So for this fixed point, you need to have something called hook. So that is called as S hook. Then you need to have a suspension unit. That is the one where I showed you. This is called the suspension unit. Then you need to have something called slings. So slings are the things which will be supporting the body part. So this is called sling. So this is one type of sling. This is another type of sling, and you have many types of sling. So you need to have a sling so that the sling will be supporting the body part. Okay, then you need to have something called wooden cleat. Then for fixing the wooden cleat, you need to have something called dog clip, carabiner clip, or anything. So let me show you the things, uh, show you the picture. Okay, just a moment. Okay, sorry. So this is the suspension cage will be of different, little bit different types. So if you see in our lab, we have something like this. So you would have seen, we will be having two suspension cage in the lab one. So that will be in steel color. So you would have seen this wire mesh. Okay, so this is called suspension cage. So you can lift it and you can put it over a cot, you can put it over a chair or anything you want. Is that clear? And you will be having hooks. So these hooks are used to put or collect the materials and hang over the side. Is that clear? So this is the suspension cage. So these are the items. So this is called sling. So this is one type of sling. So the bigger one is called as double sling. The smaller one is called a single sling. So depending on the body part, you can use a double sling or a single sling. If the body part is very small, then you can use a single sling. If the body part is bigger, then you have to use a double sling. Okay, so this sling is called as head sling. So this sling is used to hold the head. So in case if the patient is, you need to put the patient in prone lying also, you can put it. And this part you can use it over the nose so that the patient will be able to breathe it. So this is called as head sling. So the major or the first material you need for a suspension is the suspension cage. So suspension cage is this first one, or it will also be like this. So then you have to decide according to the body part. You have to put the suspension cage over a mat, or you have to put it over a cot, or you have to put it over a chair anywhere. The next is the slings. So slings is like various type. See, I'm just repeating. So slings is of various names, called in various names according to the sizes. So this is a double sling. This is a single sling. Okay, and this is a head sling. So these slings are made up of a can-wash material. Can-wash material means it is easy for you to disinfect it. So in case if suddenly if the patient is bleeding also, you can wash the sling. That's why it is made up of a can-wash material. Is that clear? So that is about the sling. Then you have another sling. This is called as 3D ring sling. Okay, so 3D ring sling means it will be having three rings. One here, and another one will be in the middle. So this is called as 3D ring sling. So you can see the ring will be of D shape. Is that clear? So that is why it is called as 3D ring sling. Is that clear? So this is a sling. Then this is called as S hook. Can you see? This is called as S hook. Okay, so this is the uh, pulley. Okay, this is a pulley. Then we will be using a rope. Then we will be using a wooden cleat. Okay, this is another spring. In case if you need it, you can use a spring. So I will explain the everything in detail. So for a suspension, you need a suspension cage. Then you need a sling. So the slings will be like this. Slings will be single sling, double sling, then three ring sling, then head sling. So four types. Okay, so according to the sizes, we divide them into four types. Is that clear? So according to the need or according to the weight of the patient, you can choose whichever sling you want to. The next is we need to have a rope. So this supporting rope is to make the is to support the sling, and it has to be attached with a suspension cage. So this is a single rope. It needs to be minimum 1.5 meter, but like if it is more than 1.5 meter, then it will be more useful. Is that clear? So this is the length of the rope. Then this length of the rope, it is just a long rope. Okay, so this long rope is attached with the wooden cleat. So this is called as wooden cleat. Can you see? This is called as wooden cleat. Okay, and this is called as dog clip. DOG, dog clip. So if you have pet animals, then you know about this clip. So this clip is normally used for uh, holding the dog belt. Okay, so that's why it is called as dog clip. Then you have something called Caribbean clip. Okay, so there is another type that is called as Caribbean clip. Okay, so two types of clips are there. So this is a single rope which will be of 1.5 meters, or it should be more than that. This rope is used to fix the sling with the suspension cage. Okay, so now this single rope is attached in different types. So according to the need, we will be attaching in a different types. One is single rope or double rope or pulley rope. Okay, so three types: single rope, double rope or pulley rope. So here if you see, this wooden cleat will be having two holes or three holes. If you see this wooden cleat, it is having two holes in it. Okay. So if you see in this wooden cleat, it has three holes in it. So if you want to make a double rope or a pulley rope, you need to have a wooden cleat that has three holes in it. Okay, so if you have only two holes, then you can make only a single rope. Is that clear? So now let me explain how to make a rope. So first thing is, one end of the rope has to be attached with a small ring, or it can be attached with any S hook. Okay, so with the help of a Q knot. Later when I'm showing the video, I will explain how to make a Q knot. Okay, so the one end of the rope is attached to a ring with the help of a Q knot. Then the rope is inserted into the wooden cleat. After inserting in the wooden cleat, then it has to come out, and you have to attach a clip. You can use a dog clip or you can use a Caribbean clip. Then after attaching to the clip, the other end has to come out through another hole. Okay, then at the end you need to put a Q knot so that it doesn't come out. Okay, so this is a single rope. So in the double rope, what you have to do is, you have to, same like that, you have to attach one end of the rope to a ring, Then you have to insert it to a wooden hole in the wooden cleat. Then you have to bring it down. Either you attach it to a pulley or you attach it to a Caribbean clip or a dark clip. Then the other end has to be taken out through the other hole. Then again you have to attach to a pulley. Then the other end of the rope has to be going through the third hole, and you need to put a Q knot. Okay, so this is called double rope. I will explain everything with a video, so don't need to worry. Okay, same thing. You can also use a pulley to put a pulley rope. So here if you see, one end of the rope has to be tied with a dark clip. That dark clip will be attached to the sling. Then it has to be taken through a pulley. Then it has to come out through a wooden cleat. Then at the then it has to come out through another dark clip. Then you have to insert through the other hole and put a Q knot. So this is called as pulley rope. Is that clear? So this is called as pulley rope, and this is called as double rope using two pulleys. Is that clear? So this is the rope. So for a suspension, you need a cage, you need a sling, you need a rope. So the sling and the rope will be choose according to the type of the according to the size of the body and according to the weight of the body. Is that clear? Then the other things you need is like wooden cleat. We need a S hook. We need to have a dark clip. Okay, so before going into the procedure, let me show you the accessories, and let me show how to put the rope. Okay. So in this video, we will be she will be showing you the different types of the sling and how to put the ropes. Is that clear?
I'm just going to show you a little bit about slings and suspension apparatus. So part of what you have is you have ropes that are attached to a ceiling or a grid, and then you have slings that go underneath the person's arm or leg to support them so they can perform movements. Now, usually you attach them to the ceiling grid with an S-hook, and then the rope will be put in like that. The rope will have usually a round area or a closed area that will hook onto the S-hook, and then a clip that can attach to the slings. Okay, so the slings can be different sizes, wide or narrow, depending on whether it's a foot or an ankle or a hand that you want to do, but they have clips that will be attached to the hook. The other thing you have to think about is that when you have this, it's really quite long, and if you think of it, that you can change the height of the bed. So this might be too long and you won't be able to lift the person up or lift the limb up. So what you need to do is you need to be able to modify and change how the hook is going to be attached. And the way we do that is through this. By having it slanted like this, it stops itself. By having it even, you can move it up and down. So you can change the height where this is by doing a knot. So if we look at the knot, we want the knot to be easily untied, but we don't want it to slip when it should be holding here. So what we need to do is you loop it and pull it through. This free end is where the slip comes through. Okay, again, loop and pull through. This end, the more you pull it, the tighter it gets. So that's how that end works. Now I'm just going to hook this to the grid and allow you to see how it sets up. Okay, so I have the rope. You identify where you're going to center it on a joint or something. You bring the wooden, or in some cases not here, but in some places they have metal clips. And so you bring it down close to where the hook is, over the center of your axis of movement. You tie that knot that I told you about. And then what you can do is you can now move this up and out of the way. So if I was attaching this to a person, I would hook it around them, then hook to that, and then I could take the weight of the limb with this on the sling. Okay, so I go up as high as I need to get and have the limb just off the bed or off the mat, and then you just close it like this so it holds it tight. When you lower, you open it, bring it down, and then release the patient.
Okay, so do you want to see the video again?
I'm just going to show you a little bit about slings and suspension apparatus. So part of what you have is you have ropes that are attached to a ceiling or a grid, and then you have slings that go underneath the person's arm or leg to support them so they can perform movements. Now, usually you attach them to the ceiling grid with an S-hook, and then the rope will be put in like that. The rope will have usually a round area or a closed area that will hook onto the S-hook, and then a clip that can attach to the slings. Okay, so the slings can be different sizes, wide or narrow, depending on whether it's a foot or an ankle or a hand that you want to do, but they have clips that will be attached to the hook. The other thing you have to think about is that when you have this, it's really quite long, and if you think of it, that you can change the height of the bed. So this might be too long and you won't be able to lift the person up or lift the limb up. So what you need to do is you need to be able to modify and change how the hook is going to be attached. And the way we do that is through this. By having it slanted like this, it stops itself. By having it even, you can move it up and down. So you can change the height where this is by doing a knot. So if we look at the knot, we want the knot to be easily untied, but we don't want it to slip when it should be holding here. So what we need to do is you loop it and pull it through. This free end is where the slip comes through. Okay, again, loop and pull through. This end, the more you pull it, the tighter it gets. So that's how that end works. Now I'm just going to hook this to the grid and allow you to see how it sets up. Okay, so I have the rope. You identify where you're going to center it on a joint or something. You bring the wooden, or in some cases not here, but in some places they have metal clips. And so you bring it down close to where the hook is, over the center of your axis of movement. You tie that knot that I told you about. And then what you can do is you can now move this up and out of the way. So if I was attaching this to a person, I would hook it around and then hook to that, and then I could take the weight of the limb with this and the sling. Okay, so I go up as high as I need to get and have the limb just off the bed or off the mat, and then you just close it like this so it holds it tight. When you lower, you open it, bring it down, and then release the patient.
Okay, I hope like everybody got an idea how. I hope everybody got an idea how to do this suspension. Okay, now we will go into the other parts, like we have types of suspension, then the procedure. The first is like we have two types of suspension. Okay, one is called as vertical suspension. The other one is called as axial suspension. Okay, so one is called as vertical suspension. The other one is axial suspension. So vertical suspension is you need to fix the body part just above the center of gravity. Okay, so every body part has something called center of gravity. So if you see in the human body, over S2, the center of gravity will be passing through. So like that, every body segment, like if you take a upper limb, then you have something called center of gravity. If you take a lower limb, definitely there will be a point where the gravity will be passing through. So like that, every body segment, for example, this you would have learned in your biomechanics in the first chapter, how to find out the center of gravity of a regular shaped object and irregular shaped object. So regular shaped object is like a square. So if you draw um, two lines from one end to the other end, then the center point is your center of gravity. That means in that point only the center of gravity will be passing through. So like that, irregular object also you can do, like a rectangle, like a baseball bat. I hope like the example is baseball bat. So for a baseball bat, if you want to find out the center of gravity, exactly you have to go to the middle point, then go little bit towards the heavier part. So heavier part is your heavier part means like your towards your that means proximal joint. So if you take up the lower limb, so in lower limb you can divide them into the segment, thigh segment, leg segment. So in thigh segment you have to check the center point in between the hip joint and the knee joint, then go little bit towards your middle proximal. So that will be the center of gravity. So like that, every body part will have a center of gravity. Center of gravity means nothing but where the gravitational force will be passing through. Okay, so we make that, but center of gravity as a fixed point. So if you fix the body part over the center of gravity, you will not have any movement. You will be just having a pendular movement, that is little bit of swaying movement. Okay, just swaying here and there. So little bit of swaying movement will be there. So that is the vertical suspension. Is it clear? So we have two types of suspension, vertical suspension and axial suspension. So in vertical suspension, you will be putting the fixed point just above the center of gravity of the particular body part. Okay, so when you are putting over like that, you will not have a complete movement. You will be just having a small pendular movement like a showing. So I will show you. So here if you see, so here if you see this particular person is just put in a suspension. If you see, the body part is not touching the bed, it is just suspended in the air. Okay, and each body part is fixed over the vertical axis. So for the head, they will find out what is the center of gravity, that is the middle point of the head. Then they will be fixing it over it. Like that, for each segment, they will be finding out what is the center point and they will be fixing over the center point. So if you fix it like that, and when you lift, the body part will be just lifted up in the air and it will be just swinging. No movement will be there. It will be just swinging in the air. Is that clear? So this is a perfect example for your vertical suspension. So here they have done a vertical suspension for the whole body. Like this, you can you can do it only for your hand, only for your upper limb, or only for your lower limb also you can do it. Is that clear? So this is your vertical suspension. Next is your axial suspension. So axial suspension is the fixed point, that is the S hook will be fixed over the center of joint axis. So every joint in anatomy you would have learned. Every joint will have a center point or an axis point through which the movement will take place. Your flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal rotation, external rotation, everything will be taking place over the center of axis. Okay, so when you fix this S hook over the center of axis, then you will be able to get the movement freely. Okay, so that is called axial suspension. So in vertical suspension, you won't have any movement. You will be just lifting the body part above and swaying in the air. But in axial suspension, since you are fixing it over a center of joint axis, you will be having movement. Okay, so if you want to put axial suspension, you need to know where the joint axis is passing. So for every joint, you will be having a joint axis. So you have to find out where the joint axis is passing, and above that you have to fix the S hook. Then you will be able to move the body part freely. So if you see here, they have done for hip flexion and extension. So they have fixed the S hook. If you see, this is the S hook or fixed point. The S hook or the fixed point is fixed directly over the greater trochanter. So greater trochanter is a joint axis where you will be having hip flexion and extension. So over that, when you fix it, automatically you will be able to do a hip flexion and extension. Is that clear? So this is called your vertical suspension. So this vertical suspension will help you to do the movement. So you will be having lot of movement in this axial suspension. So you can use this axial suspension to improving the range of motion. You can also use this axial suspension to improve the muscle power. Is that clear? So you can modify this axial suspension in 4 ways. You can move the S hook medially. Medially means towards the body. Okay, you can move the S hook medially 3 points, or you can move the S hook laterally 3 points. So this will increase or decrease the resistance. Okay, so when I'm explaining the video, I will explain how to modify the S hook. So the S hook can be moved medially or laterally. By moving the S hook medially or laterally, you will be able to increase or decrease the resistance. So if you want to increase the muscle strength, then you only need to increase the resistance. And when they are doing against the resistance, the muscle power will increase drastically. Okay, so you can also move the S hook proximal or distal. When you are moving the proximal or distal, this will move towards the center of gravity, so the movement will be reduced. You will be just having a minimal pendular movement. You will not have much of movement. Is that clear? So now we will see what are the indications for this suspension therapy. So we have three indications. Whenever the muscle power is 1, 2 and 3, then you can give this suspension therapy. So whenever you want to increase the muscle power from 0 to 1, 0 to 2, 0 to 3, then you can use this suspension. I hope you know what is MMT, manual muscle technique. You would have learned how to measure and how to do the movement. Okay, so when you want to improve the muscle power, then you can use the suspension therapy. That means you can use only till grade 3, cannot use for more than that. Then, whenever the joint is having reduced range of motion, so when the joint is having reduced range of motion, it is called as hypomobility. Hypomobility. Increased range of motion is called as hypermobility. Okay, reduced range of motion is called as hypomobility. So you will be able to increase the mobility using that. Okay. Then in case if you have any muscle spasm, then also you can use this suspension to reduce the muscle spasm. So these are the three indications you can use to use whenever you want the suspension therapy. Is that clear? So these are the indications. So when you are doing the suspension, what are the effects and uses? This suspension will help you to increase the range of motion. This suspension will help you to give relaxation. So by giving relaxation, it will help you to reduce the muscle spasm. Then it will help you to increase the muscle strength. Then it will help you to do the movement in a movement pattern in a re-education manner. Okay, so these are the uses of suspension therapy. Then apart from that, we have the uses of axial suspension. So compared to vertical suspension, axial suspension has more uses because when you're doing axial suspension, you will be getting some movement. When you're doing vertical suspension, you will not get any movement. Okay, so that's why axial suspension has more uses. So the first is re-educating the strength. Re-educating the strength means you can improve the muscle power from one point to the other. So when you do a MMT and when you find out the muscle power is 3 or less than 3, then you can use the suspension and you can re-educate or re-bring the muscle strength. Okay, then you can increase the range of motion. Then uh, that means like if you want to give any stability, or if you don't want to do any movement, then also you can use this axial suspension. It helps you to relax the muscle. It helps you to minimize the friction from the gravity. So since it is like lifted above the gravitation level and it is fixed over a sling, you will be reducing the friction. Then it will be counterbalancing the effects of gravity. So these are the uses of axial suspension. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes, miss.
Okay, so before going into the procedure, I think I'll give you some 5 minutes break. Don't go out, just you can get up and walk around and come back and sit. Is that clear? Don't log off. So time is now 2:50. You can come back by 2:55. Can we start? Can we start? Is everybody back?
Yes. Yes, miss.
Okay, so we have seen four parts of this particular technique. We have seen what is the fact of the suspension. So when you are eliminating the gravity and when you are lifting the body part away from the contact surface, the body part will be easily able to move. So that is a fact. And in this when you are making them to move, you have two aspects. One is either you will be suspending over the center of gravity of the particular segment, or you will be fixing it over the joint axis. When you are fixing it over the joint axis, the body part will be able to move freely. So that is called as axial suspension. When you are fixing it over the center of gravity, the body part will not move much, and that is called as vertical suspension. Is that clear? Then we have seen the overall indication. Overall indication is the suspension will help you to reduce the improve the muscle power. The suspension will help you to reduce the muscle spasm. Then the suspension will help you to increase the range of motion. So these are the three indications for suspension therapy. Then when you take up axial suspension, you have more uses because the axial suspension is helping you to create movement. So the axial suspension can be used to increase the muscle power. Axial suspension can be used to increase the range of motion. The axial suspension will be helping you to reduce the muscle spasm. The axial suspension will help you to give relaxation. Okay, and the axial suspension will help you to bring out the movement re-education or strength re-education. Okay, in the other aspect, the vertical suspension will help you to give relaxation. The vertical suspension will help you to reduce the friction. That means when the patient is lying down for a very long time, when if he is lying down for a very long time, because of his body weight, the bed will be rubbing over the skin and it will be causing something called as pressure sore. That is a complication of long time bedridden patient. So to reduce or to prevent this pressure sore, you can make the person to do this vertical suspension, or you can do a vertical suspension so that the body part is suspended in the air, and this will help them to reduce the friction, which will help them to reduce the pressure sore or a complication. Is that clear? So those are the difference in the indication, and this indication is also for your vertical suspension, that is localization of muscle effort, no muscle activity. So this is for your vertical suspension. Is that clear? All other will be used for your axial suspension. So only 2 or 3 is for your vertical suspension. Is that clear? Oh, that is about indication. When you say about contraindication, if the doctor has said that the person should not move the body part, then you have to avoid the suspension. So for example, the patient has a fracture in the lower limb and the doctor has advised not to move the hip joint. So in that case, you have to avoid hip suspension. Is that clear? Or sometimes if the doctor has advised not to move the particular segment, then you have to avoid suspension of the particular body segment, maybe upper limb or maybe lower limb. So that is a major contraindication of the suspension therapy. Other than that, like fever, you have to avoid suspension. Okay, so fever is a general contraindication. You have to avoid any technique. Okay, so that's why you will be avoiding any type of technique on patient who are having fever. Is that clear? So this is the contraindication. So we have seen what is a fact, we have seen what is the indication. We have seen what is the effects and uses. We have seen what is the contraindication. Now we will see what is the procedure. So to do the procedure, we need to follow certain steps. So the steps are, first is you need to correctly position the patient in an appropriate position. So if you want to do for hip flexion and extension, then you need to position the patient in side lying. Okay, so like that for each and every movement, you have a position, you have a starting position. So that position you have to fix it. Okay, next is you need to collect the apparatus uh, together before starting. So you have to first collect all the things that is needed. Then you can just hang it on the hooks. Okay, then check the apparatus whether it is working properly. That means when you do the rope, you need to check whether it will be able to hang in a particular point. Okay, so that one you have to check. That is called as checking the apparatus. Then you need to decide whether you need to give axial suspension or vertical suspension. So if you want to give vertical suspension, then you have to find out the center of gravity and put the suspension hook. If you're going towards axial suspension, then you have to find the joint axis. Then you have to put the hook over it. Then attach the rope in sequence. Then you need to raise the body part. Then you have to do the movement. So that is a procedure. Okay, so while doing it, you need to see certain precautions. One is you need to check the apparatus and accessories properly. So after lifting the body part, if the knot is not put properly, then it will come out. Then the patient's leg will fall down. So you need to be very careful over that. So you need to check whether the rope is tightly fixed. All those things you have to check it properly. Then you have to avoid hyperextension, or you have to avoid movement above the anatomical movement. So for example, if the hip range of motion is abduction is only 0 to 60, then you have to stop at 0 to 60. You cannot go beyond 60 degrees. Okay, so this one you need to check. Then you have to raise the body part in such a way that the proximal joint is lifted first, then the distal. This one you will understand when I am showing you the video. Then suspend the body part in a comfortable position. Don't lift so high or don't lift so less. Okay, it is enough if you just lift up little bit above the surface or little bit above the cot. Is that clear? So these are the precautions you have to do. Now we will see how to do the suspension. So first we will see for hip abduction and adduction. Okay, so for hip abduction and adduction, the starting position of the patient is in supine lying. You have to keep the opposite leg abducted. So this is the position. The patient should be positioned in supine lying in such a way that you have to keep a pillow under the shoulder. Okay, so you need to keep the pillow under the shoulder. Then you keep the other leg abducted and keep it over a footstool here. Don't hang it down like this. You have to keep it over a footstool on the other side. Is that clear? Okay. So this is the position of the patient. Then you have to go for the fixed point. So here we are going to do axial suspension. So if you want to do axial suspension, you have to fix the point above the joint axis. For hip flexion, abduction and adduction, the joint axis will be passing through ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. So all these joint axis you would have already learnt in your goniometer. I hope in goniometer you have something called fixed point. The same point we are also going to use here. Okay, so you have to find out where is anterior superior iliac spine. Then exactly over the anterior superior iliac spine you have to put the fixed point, that is your S hook. Okay, then one sling you have to use it over the thigh, another sling you have to use it over the ankle. So this sling you have to see if the patient's body part is very heavy, then you go with double sling. If the body part is less heavy, then you go with a single sling. Okay, so attach the thigh over a sling, then you put it the S hook. You put the rope. So again here you can decide whether you want to go for a single rope, double rope, or a pulley rope. So according to the need and weight of the patient, you can go with any type of rope. Then the lower segment, that is the ankle, is attached over the with the help of a 3D ring sling. Okay, so that one you can attach with a 3D ring sling. Then after attaching both the ropes, both the ropes will be attached to the S hook, and this S hook will be directly over the ASIS. Is that clear? So the S hook will be directly over the ASIS. Is that clear? Then both the ropes will be attached. Then you lift the proximal rope first, then you lift the distal one. So lift the proximal rope first, then you lift the distal one. Is that clear? So after lifting little bit, so you lift in such a way that the thigh is just above the cot. No need to lift too high. If you lift too high, then the limb will not be in neutral, it will be in hip flexion. Is that clear? So you have to just lift little bit so that the thigh is just above the cot and the body part doesn't compress over the cot. Okay. Then you ask the person to do the movement, that is hip abduction and adduction. So you ask the person to do the movement, that is hip abduction and adduction, and see to that they don't do beyond 60 degree. So the maximum hip abduction is 0 to 60 degree. So they should not do beyond 60 degree. The maximum hip adduction ADD is 0 to 30 degree. So they should not go beyond this 0 to 30 degree. Is that clear? So maybe if the patient is having lesser muscle power, they will be doing very less. Then slowly they will be improving. The muscle power will improve and slowly the range of motion will be improved. So when the patient is starting to do the movement, if the patient is not able to do, then you have to stimulate the muscle. How to stimulate the muscle is you tap the muscle over the origin or the insertion. Okay, that is one of the technique to stimulate the muscle. So you need to tap over the origin or the insertion. So when the patient is doing adduction, ADD, when the patient is doing adduction, then you have to tap over the inner thigh. When the patient is doing abduction, then you have to tap over the outer thigh. So this tapping will help the muscle to get stimulated, and when the muscle is getting stimulated, more and more movement will be happening. So that is how you are going to increase the muscle power. Then later, so once the patient's muscle power is increased little bit, if you want to add more resistance, then you have to move the S hook medially or laterally. Okay, so whenever you want to increase the resistance for hip adduction, ADD. So ADD movement is towards the medial side. So for this patient, you need to move the S hook laterally so that the resistance is increased. So the patient will have more resistance and the patient have to overcome more resistance to improve the muscle power. Is that clear? So if you want to give assistance, so for example, if the muscle power is very less and you want to give some more assistance, other than tapping, you want to also add some more assistance, then you can move the S hook little bit medially. Is that clear? Then you move the S hook little bit medially, that is towards the midpoint. So this will give assistance to the muscles that are doing hip adduction, ADD. So the vice versa will be there for the other group of muscles, that is hip abduction. So if you want to give assistance for hip abduction, then you need to move laterally. If you want to increase the resistance, then you need to move medially. Okay, if you want to reduce the muscle power, that means you don't need any muscle power, then you can move the S hook proximal or distal. So this will help you to reduce the muscle power. So after doing few times, So maybe some 10 times or 15 times. After doing so much time, then you can reduce the sling. So first you have to bring down the distal, then you have to bring down the proximal. Is that clear? First you have to bring down the distal, then you have to bring down the proximal. So this is for your hip abduction, adduction. So for hip flexion and extension, same thing you can do, but you have to do it in side lying. So position the patient in side lying. Then you have to put the S hook directly over the greater trochanter, because the greater trochanter is the axis through which the joint is passing. So you have to put the patient in side lying. Then you have to fix the S hook directly above the greater trochanter, because that is the point. Is that clear? So when you are making them to position in the side lying, you are supposed to bend the lower leg. So I hope you would have learnt all these in fundamental positions. Okay, so you have to bend the lower leg. Then the above leg will be will be in neutral or will be in straight. Okay, so this also you have to follow the same thing. So you can give tapping over the muscle origin or insertion. Then you can give the you can modify the sling either medially or laterally according to the muscle power of the patient. Is that clear? So next is, so we have seen hip abduction, adduction, hip flexion and extension. Now we will see, we can't do internal rotation and external rotation. So now we will see the knee joint. So I hope like you also know, that whenever you are doing any movement, the proximal joint of the movement, that is when you are doing the hip movement, then the proximal joint should be stabilized. So whenever you are doing the hip movement, the proximal movement is your pelvic joint. So the pelvic joint will be already stabilized using the bed. So you don't need to stabilize the pelvis. But in case of knee joint, the proximal joint is the hip joint. So you need to stabilize the hip joint. So for stabilizing the hip joint, you can use a vertical suspension. Is that clear? So for stabilizing the hip joint, you have to use a vertical suspension. Then for moving the knee joint, you have to do a axial suspension. Okay. So here again the position of the patient is in side lying. You can give one pillow between the legs so that the other leg is supported comfortably. Then to fix the S hook, sorry, to fix the hip joint, you have to find out the vertical suspension center of gravity of the thigh. Okay, so from the hip joint, you measure till the knee joint, you have to measure, you find out the middle point, then go little bit towards the heavier part. Okay, there you have to put the vertical suspension and you have to fix the thigh. Then for the knee joint, you have to put another axial suspension. So you have to fix it over the knee joint, that is lateral epicondyle. Okay, so you can you can put over the lateral condyle of the knee joint. Okay, so fix the S hook over the lateral condyle. So in the hip joint, we have used only one fixed point, but in the knee joint we are using two fixed point, one for the vertical suspension, another for the axial suspension. Is that clear? Then you can elevate little bit just above the bed and the patient will be doing knee flexion and extension. Is that clear? So let me show you one video to understand this more clearly.
just going to show you how to set up the slings on your patient. You always want to make sure that your sling is over the joint or the axis that you're moving from. That's your go-to starting position, because then you have a free movement. And you can see this is right over the hip joint right here. On a person, it's halfway between the pubis and the ASIS, halfway, a third, so around there. So what you need to do is you want to make sure this is in the right place. You can alter it by changing where your S-hook is on the grid. Then you want to make sure that these are kind of out of the way, so your strings are off the edge so they're not hitting the patient. And then get your slings ready. Sliding it underneath the thigh. Just try to make sure that you've got equal on both sides. And then on the foot, what you can do is you can do almost like a figure of 8. So it's going over the forefoot and then around the ankle. So you're getting good positioning. And again, trying to make sure that you've got equal distance. So what you want to do is just slide this down, hook it on. Just want to take off the slack, take up the slack, so you're not lifting the leg, just taking the slack off of it so it's nicely supported. Then you're going to put on the thigh one. Again, you want to take up the slack. So you're going to put your knot close to the bottom. If I lift the knot way up here, then when I lift it, I would be lifting above shoulder height and it would be hard for me. So I always want to make sure that it's low enough that it's easy for me to work with. Okay, and just taking the slack off. What you then want to do is you want to move the upper or the most proximal one over the heaviest area, and you're going to flatten it out and lift up. So you're taking them off the bed and then just going like this so it locks it. Then you would move to the foot and do the same thing. Part of what you don't want to do is you don't want to hyperextend the knee or hurt their knee. This isn't up high enough, their knees. And you want, this has more tension than this, so I need to ease this up a little bit. You should have the same amount of tension on both of them. And then they'll be able to easily abduct and adduct. You just want them far enough off the mat so they're not dragging. When you put them down, what you want to do is you want to put down the most distal part first, because you don't want hyperextension of the elbow or the knee. And then you would take that off, come up to the thigh, again, lower it down, unhook it so you can slide it out from underneath their thigh, and then just moving it out of the way.
I repeat the video.
On your patient. You always want to make sure that your sling is over the joint or the axis that you're moving from. That's your go-to starting position, because then you have a free movement. And you can see this is right over the hip joint right here. On a person, it's halfway between the pubis and the ASIS, halfway, a third, so around there. So what you need to do is you want to make sure this is in the right place. You can alter it by changing where your S-hook is on the grid. Then you want to make sure that these are kind of out of the way so your strings are off the edge so they're not hitting the patient. And then get your slings ready. Sliding it underneath the thigh. Just try to make sure that you've got equal on both sides. And then on the foot, what you can do is you can do almost like a figure of 8. So it's going over the forefoot and then around the ankle. So you're getting good positioning. And again, trying to make sure that you've got equal distance. So what you want to do is just slide this down, hook it on. Just want to take off the slack, take up the slack, so you're not lifting the leg, just taking the slack off of it, so it's nicely supported. Then you're going to put on the thigh one. Again, you want to take up the slack. So you're going to put your knot close to the bottom. If I lift the knot way up here, then when I lift it, I would be lifting above shoulder height and it would be hard for me. So I always want to make sure that it's low enough that it's easy for me to work with. Okay, and just taking the slack off. What you then want to do is you want to move the upper or the most proximal one over the heaviest area, and you're going to flatten it out and lift up. So you're taking them off the bed and then just going like this so it locks it. Then you would move to the foot and do the same thing. Part of what you don't want to do is you don't want to hyperextend the knee or hurt their knee. This isn't up high enough, their knees. And you want, this has more tension than this, so I need to ease this up a little bit. You should have the same amount of tension on both of them. And then they'll be able to easily abduct and adduct. You just want them far enough off the mat so they're not dragging. When you put them down, what you want to do is you want to put down the most distal part first, because you don't want hyperextension of the elbow or the knee. And then you would take that off, come up to the thigh, again, lower it down, unhook it so you can slide it out from underneath their thigh, and then just moving it out of the way.
Just a moment, let me open the slide. Okay, next we will see is leg for upper limb. So we can give the suspension for hip joint. We can also give suspension for the knee joint. So in the hip joint, we can do abduction, adduction, flexion and extension. In the knee joint, we can do flexion and extension. So next in the upper limb. So same like that, upper limb we have shoulder and the elbow. So for the shoulder joint, the proximal joint is the scapular joint. So the scapula, when the patient is lying down, the scapula will be fixed by the bed. So you don't need to fix the scapula. But in case of elbow, the proximal joint is the shoulder joint. So you need to fix the elbow using a vertical suspension. Is that clear? So first we will see about the shoulder joint, abduction and adduction. So you have to position the patient in lying, that is quarter turn lying. Okay, because for abduction and adduction you have to do in supine lying like the lower limb. But here when you do in supine lying, you will not be able to do ADD, shoulder adduction. Okay, so you will not be able to do shoulder adduction because the patient's body will be hitting. In the case of lower limb, we made the leg to be coming on the other side and hanging at the side of the bed. But here, since it is the body, you cannot make it hang like that. So because of that, then we will be positioning the trunk in such a way that it is not hindering the movement. So for that, you have to position the patient in quarter turn position. Quarter turn position means you make the person to be in side lying, then keep a pillow behind the patient and make them to lie on the pillow. So this is called quarter turn position. Is that clear? Especially like quarter turn, because in that quarter turn position only the shoulder joint will be in the plane of scapula. So when the shoulder joint is in the plane of scapula, then only you will be able to do abduction and adduction completely. Is that clear? So one sling will be attached under the you need to fix the point over the anterior portion of acromion process, because that is the joint axis it is passing through. So you have to palpate the acromion process of scapula. Then you have to move little bit anterior and fix the point over the anterior portion of the acromion process. So over that you have to put the axial at a fixed point. Then you have to use one sling under the arm, another sling under the over the wrist and hand. So for the wrist and hand, you will be using a 3D ring sling in the figure of 8 position. Okay, then after attaching this two sling, then you have to lift the proximal first, then you have to lift the distal. So you have to lift the proximal first, then you have to lift the distal. Okay, so this will help you to lift the hand over the particular over a particular point. No need to lift too much. If you are lifting too much, then the plane of scapula will change. So don't lift too much. If you lift too much, then the shoulder will be in flexed position. It will not be in a neutral position. Okay. Then you ask the person to do the movement. So there is abduction and adduction. So when the patient is doing adduction, you have to tap over the medial aspect of the arm. When the patient is doing abduction, you have to tap over the lateral aspect of the joint. Okay, then if you want to increase or decrease the resistance, then you have to move the fixed point medially or laterally. In case of ADD, for assistance you move medially, for resistance you move laterally. So same thing will be vice versa. In case of abduction, for assistance you need to move laterally, for resistance you need to move medially. So not only that, if you want to give more resistance, you can also use a weight cuff. You can put a weight cuff inside the sling. So you can put it so that it will also give you resistance and assistance. Okay, so same thing for the shoulder flexion and extension. You have to put the patient in side lying. Then the fixed point is just over the acromion process, a little bit towards the head of the humerus. You have to move little laterally towards the head of the humerus. Okay, that is the fixed point. Then remaining will be just same. So you put one sling over the arm, you put another sling. There is a 3D ring sling over the wrist. Then you elevate the proximal first, then you elevate the distal. Then you ask the person to do flexion and extension. So when the patient is doing flexion, you have to tap anteriorly. When the patient is doing extension, you have to tap posteriorly. This is for tapping. So for increasing or decreasing the resistance also, you have to move the point medial or lateral according to the movement you are going to. Next is for the elbow joint. So for elbow joint, you have to make the person to be in a sitting position. So you can see here. So for elbow joint, you make the person to be in a sitting position. Then here, since the shoulder is the proximal joint, you need to stabilize the shoulder using a vertical suspension. So to find out the vertical suspension, you measure from the head of humerus, or you measure from the shoulder joint to the elbow. You find out the middle point. Then you have to move little bit towards the shoulder joint. Then you have to put the S hook. Okay, then with the help of a sling, you have to support the shoulder. So you have to support the shoulder in 90-degree abduction. Then for the elbow, you have to fix the S hook just above the lateral epicondyle. So S hook should be just above the lateral epicondyle like this. Then you put a 3D sling over the lower hand. You just elevate it along with the shoulder. So that is the complete upper limb should be in shoulder abduction 90 degrees. Then this will help you to remove the movement, do the movement, flexion and extension of elbow. When the patient is doing elbow flexion, tap anteriorly. When the patient is doing elbow extension, tap posteriorly. Okay. So if you want to increase or decrease the resistance, it's enough if you just move this point medially or laterally according to the joint. Okay, so this is about the suspension. Let me show you the video on the upper limb suspension.
Hi, now I am going to discuss about how to apply the suspension therapy for various body parts. Now in this video I am going to explain about how to apply for shoulder flexion extension. When the patient has a problem of flexor muscles and extensor muscles of shoulder is weak, so how to apply the suspension. So here with us, Reddy is me, our friend, my friend is Reddy is with me. He is going to be a model for this video. So now I am going to apply. First we have to take S hook. So this is a S hook as I told. So we have to apply in this gap actually. So we have a mesh over here. So in this gap we have to apply it. So after application, so we have to apply this rope inside this hole actually. So then we can able to tie it out with a normal small tie actually. So normal tie you can apply it. So before that we make the patient when we apply for the sideline. So there is a better position for shoulder flexion extension. So we make the patient to lie down in the sideline position, right? Please ready, can you go for sideline? Yeah. So after application, make the patient close to me, lie down close to me. Yeah. So we have to take the point as a greater tuberosity or greater tubercle we take as a point over here. So I am going to change the S to somewhat close to the great tuberosity and applying here, for example, and applying here. There is a better point to apply over here. So we apply it safely, very tightly over this knot should be very tightly, it should not slow down or smooth down when we are doing the suspension, we should not lose down. Then we apply the wooden plug over here. So we take the wooden clad and apply it through this hole, one hole, right? And we take it out. Then we can able to apply to other hole. Before that we have to, as I said before, so before we have to connect with the other one S hook in this end to connect the sling properly. So we apply it over. in this, before we put in this, so another whole thread, right? So we have to apply like this, right? And after that, what we supposed to do it, right? So we make the point. We supposed to hand out this screw should be parallel to the greater tubercle, right? So before we apply the patients, so we should check the contraindications and indications. Indication, as I said, shoulder flexor muscles really weak. So muscle power 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 we can able to apply this one. So re-educating, this is a technique, is a mainly for re-educating the muscle power from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2. Then after application, so we have to hand out, we have to check if the S2 supposed to come parallel to the greater tubercle, right? Yeah, somewhat parallel, right? Yeah, somewhat parallel. Little bit move forward. Yeah, it's a parallel, right? So it's supposed to, this is called axial suspension. What I take as axis, greater tubercle. So this is called axial suspension, right? After we have to connect this body part for use of sling, right? So we make the patient to put it inside. For example, we are supposed to hang out on the elbow. So if you apply above the elbow, above the arm, so while you are doing the movement of flexion extension, the movement will take place in the elbow flexion extension. So we should avoid the elbow flexion movement. So we are applying on the elbow joint itself. Then we can able to connect by use of S-sling. So as we applied before, so we have to apply it on the S-sling, right? So now I am still tightening it, right? Again, hopefully it will come better. So we can able to apply like this. Yeah, hopefully, right? That's better. Yeah. So it should be hanged properly, right? Then we have to apply, right? Yeah. So as we read this, is telling to me something. So we apply properly. So that is very important, right? We are supposed to take a single knot. We over here to apply, right? So we make it like this knot. That's very important. So this rope should not hang out. We should not go here and there on the patient's face, right? So we should lock it properly because of we have a lot of holes over here. We put it over that hole, right? And we are taking a one more point over here. So one more hook over here, one more S hooks over here. We take this joint to connect with this, right? So we have to apply over here. Okay, so we have to connect with this, right? Now we are going to discuss the another one screw should be connected to connect the wrist part to move the shoulder into flexion extension, right? So how to connect the wrist? So here we are connected one screw with the another one screw. We should not connect directly to the apparatus. We should connect with the previous access point we have taken. That access hook should be connected to the other one, right? Then we have to apply the rope, right? We are seeing here, rope over here, black cluster, right? Then we can able to apply over here, use normal single knot, right? So this is completely empty, right? Then we have to connect with the another one S2. Can I get a one more S2, please? Thanks, thank you. Then one more. So we have to connect like this. Then we have to connect this thing with another one S2 over here. we are getting here. So we got one more scoop over here. So that scoop should be connected over here, right? Yeah, seeing it, right? Then we have to connect this pole to the other one pole. Hopefully, I'm doing wrongly. So we have to put it in this easily. Then we have to take the loop, right? Yeah. Oops, we take a little bit because we are going to this, right? Log this. We use it in the normal. Laying off, right? Yeah, like this. Yeah. Okay. And we take the base cell, we have to take the triple cell. So we have to connect. Yeah, base cell, we have connected. Now to source, yeah, ready. Then from here, yeah. So we have to go like this. Which distance we can properly with the other school. We are connecting with the first, right? Yeah, almost we are done with the supporting stem also. This should not, the stroke should not hang, so I am going to over here, right? Now we are going to ask the patient to move properly, right? For example, we have two tab. What is the muscle is supporting the flexion extensions? For example, deltoid. And the fibers, posterior fibers is doing flexion extension. So we have to tap over here. For sensory input, we as we know proper subtle neuromuscular facilitation. So when we are touching, automatically we are tapping. While we are tapping, we are stimulating the muscle. So we have to tap on the muscle. We ask the patient to keep straight, hold straight, right? So this sling should be straight, properly should not hang. We ask the patient to do flexion, right? Yeah, good. Ready? Good flexion. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's all. Exactly good. Flexions while doing, we have to tap over here, right? Right? Tap, 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 tap. Do it, do it, do it, do it. Okay? So this sling should not be into proper and yeah, now it's supposed to be proper. Yeah, that will take it one more time. Yeah, yeah, good, 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 good. Do it, do it. Okay, right? Do it again. Yeah, so we have to give an active command should be given. That command makes a lot of changes over in the muscles in the patient having a problem of paralysis and all, right? So same like we ask the patient to do extension while tapping on their posterior fibers. Extension, do it, extension, yeah. Do it. So 45 degree or 45 to 60 degree of extension will be possible. Yeah, we can able to go further, right? Extension, yes, good, good, good. We have to tap over on the right side. We have to stand on the right side. Yeah, we have to do flexion also. Yeah, good, 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 good. Yeah. Like this, we can apply for the shoulder flexion. So while you are applying here, if you are changing the point from anterior or from front to back, we call it as pendular suspension. That is called pendular suspension. For example, if you are changing the point forward, right? That is mobility for flexion and resistance for extension. So when we are changing the point towards back side, that is for extension mobility and strengthening for flexors. So this is the concept of applying the pendulum suspension, right? So hopefully you are understanding about shoulder flexion. So we can able to see some other videos, we can able to see other body parts and all. Hopefully this video is helpful. Thank you. Subscribe my channel as a physiotherapy channel is available for your further clarification and all. Thank you.
Okay, so I hope everybody could have got a little bit know what is like suspension. So again, we will be seeing this practicals in person. Uh, but just to write your theory exam, you want to know how we are giving, so that's why I have attached the video. Is that clear? So if you have any doubt, you can ask me. I will be attaching all the notes by today in LMS, so that you can see, you can read. And if you have any doubt, you can put it in the group, or you can also WhatsApp me. Is that clear? So if you don't have any doubt, then we will close the class for today. Tomorrow it is a 1 hour class, right? 11 to 12. So we'll have class during that time. Thank you. Bye.